Welcome to Stuff They Didn't Teach Me in Sunday School. When you go to Israel today, you will still see shepherding of sheep done much the same way it was done in Jesus' day. You will still see men and boys with a flock of sheep walking with nothing else controlling those sheep other than the shepherd and his staff. They aren't driven, they're led. The image that Jesus uses in John chapter 10 is that of a shepherd and his sheep, but you have to understand it from a biblical perspective, from a Palestinian perspective, from the area of Israel, because the way that sheep are tended in Israel are far different than the way sheep are tended here. We pen them up into big pastures and move them around with dogs. They led them out into the wide open spaces and stayed with their sheep. Chapter 10 has its basis in the Old Testament. You've got to go back to Ezekiel 34. God in the Old Testament constantly refers, or often refers, to the kings of Israel as shepherds. And in Ezekiel 34, he says, there have been awful shepherds of this flock. They have fleeced the flock. They have tormented the flock. They have not tended my flock. And God says, I'm angry with them. And in Ezekiel 34, he says, there'll come a day when I will send a shepherd. In fact, I will be their shepherd. And I will tend them with love, and I will lead them, and I will guide them. I'll not rip them off like these shepherds are. I'll not mislead them like these shepherds are. I will be their shepherd. Into that setting, to a people who know that passage so well, that Ezekiel 34 passage, Jesus says, first of all, in verse 7, I am the door of the sheep. That's I am number 3 in John's Gospel. But then in verse 11 of chapter 10, he says, I am the good shepherd. Not a good shepherd, the good shepherd. You know the Ezekiel 34 passage. You know a multitude of references in the Old Testament to the fact to the idea when God would send a shepherd to guide his people. I am that shepherd, Jesus says. I think we spend a multitude of time in our churches trying to describe what it means for Jesus to be a shepherd, and we may miss the point that he's making, which is, I fulfill those Old Testament passages. I replace all that expectation about how you're going to get a new king that's way better than those old kings were. I'm the new king. One way he's going to be way better is he's going to be our king forever, not just for his lifetime, but he's going to live forever, and he's our king today, even as he lives with God in heaven. He does make a statement that's kind of interesting. In verse 14, he says, I am the good shepherd. I know my own, and my own know me. As the Father knows me, and I know the Father, and I lay down my life for the sheep. He hadn't done that yet at this point, but he would. And then in verse 16, and he says, and I have other sheep. It's not just this nation of Israel that I'm going to shepherd. And his reference is no doubt to you and me, to Gentiles, to those of us who aren't part of the nation of Israel. Jesus, the Good Shepherd, replacing that Old Testament expectation of what the Good Shepherd would do and would be. Jesus, your Good Shepherd, my Good Shepherd, who lays down his life for us.